What's going on, you guys? It's Joby, and tonight I am recording some drums, so I thought real quick I would go over some drum mic placement with you. Just some things that really help me out. I think I get a pretty darn good drum sound considering I record them in a basement. So maybe your space isn't ideal either. This ceiling is like not tall. So the biggest thing to remember when you're recording drums, the snare drum is God, okay? And then phase is Jesus. The biggest thing that you want to do is try to remember that the snare is the king, all right? And then you want to base all your other decisions off the king. All right, we're going to start with the kick drum. You can see that I've got my kick drum mic, which is an Electro Voice ND868. That is my favorite kick mic. And that is just inside the hole of the drum head. And it's as far to the edge as I can get it while keeping it pointed at the beater. Pointing it at the beater is going to get you some of the click and some of the attack of the beater. But keeping it close to the edge is going to keep your bass drum sounding bassy. You want as much thump as possible. And the more you're over here to the edge, the more thump you're gonna get. But you want to kind of point it at the beater. Like I said, everything else is based off the snare drum. So if we come over here, we'll see that the mic I have on the snare is a little bit up off the head. I would like to have it higher, but the important thing you'll notice is it's pointing right at the center of the snare. Now, if you look at my tom mic that's up here, where is that pointing? The center of the snare. If you look at my floor tom mic, which is a Beta 52, which is also a kick drum mic, but sounds awesome on floor toms. Where is it pointing? Center of the snare, right? Here's my left overhead. I know that the microphone is backwards and looks weird, but that's so I can get it as high as possible. I would call this my left overhead, by the way, because I pan the drums drummer perspective. So my left overhead is right above these two cymbals and pointed where? Center of the snare. Look at my right overhead. Same thing, the microphone's backwards because of my weird setup. Where is it pointed? Center of the snare. Do you see a pattern here? You'll notice this one's a little higher than that one. That's because my drummer plays with his stuff kind of way over. I wish he played tighter, but he doesn't. So you have to do what works with your drummer. So therefore, that mic's a little further away from the snare drum, so we want to get this one kind of a little further away. That one's about 4 feet away. This one's not quite 4 feet. I really wish I could get it to 4 feet, but, you know, dims the bricks, kids. I could push it back, but I prefer the sound of these microphones when they're straight over the cymbals instead of like back looking at the cymbals. Could definitely do that though. Also, by the way, no microphone snobbery, please. These are $18 newer microphones from Amazon. I bought them to use as room mics, thinking they might be crunchy and crappy and might be a cool room mic sound, but we recorded some demos one night and I put them up as overheads and they sound light years better than the $300 AKG mics I was using for overheads. So now I'm using $18 microphones for overheads because they sound great. So don't be a mic snob. If we come over here, you'll see left room mic. It is exactly 11 feet, 11 inches away from the snare, and it's pointed where? Center of the snare drum. Over here is my other room mic. It is 11 feet, 11 inches. And yes, I measure with a tape measure. Where is it looking? Center of the snare. Now, why do you want all these mics pointing at the center of the snare? That is because you want to get your phase as close to perfect as possible while you're recording. And having everything pointing at the center of the snare really helps with phase issues when you're just a dude recording at home in a not ideal room. Why did I choose to put this room mic here? Well, because this is where I stand when we're practicing, and that's where the drums are when we're practicing. So this microphone is as close to ear height as I can get it. It's a little low. I'm 6'3", but that's as high as my stand goes. But anyway, the reason this is here is because it gives me a pretty darn good reference of what those drums should sound like in this room. So I place this mic here where I stand when I practice, and then I place the other room mic based on the position of this one. And yes, get a tape measure, measure to the center of the snare, get your room mics the exact same distance away from the drums. Also, if you can do that with your overheads, do it. This is as close as I could possibly get them to an equal distance from the snare and still capture the cymbals the way I prefer to. But if I had a larger room and some nice mic stands, I would absolutely 100% take a tape measure and measure from the capsule to the center of the snare, and from the capsule to the center of the snare. And I would make gosh darn sure that they were the same distance away from the center of that snare. Now, could I take this mic and back it up, and that mic and back it up, and get them like angled and pointing at the center of the snare? Absolutely. And I have done that in the past, and I just prefer the overhead mics to be pointing straight down at the cymbals. That's the way I like it, so that's the way I do it. You don't have to do it this way. You could pull the mics back and angle them and point them at the cymbals and maybe get a little better phase than I'm gonna get here. I'm gonna get pretty darn good phase though. And the other thing is, I'm gonna roll so much bottom end off those overheads. I'm gonna high pass the crap out of them. So you're really not gonna be hearing the kick or the snare in those overhead tracks. So the phase issues become a little less important. I mean, they are still super duper important. Don't get me wrong. But when you're high passing the living crap out of something to where it's going to take out almost all the snare and definitely all of the kick, at least 99% of the kick, it's a little bit less important, but still extremely important. Now, I would say if you're recording in a room like this, there's a plugin called Auto Align. I would highly recommend picking that up, because if your phase gets off when you're recording and you don't realize it, which you should realize it, you should correct for it, of course. First, you should move the microphones, and that's the other thing. My drummer's not here right now, so these microphone positions are not permanent. When he comes in and plays the kit, all this stuff might move further away from the drum head, further back, higher up, whatever it takes to make the drum sound right. But if you end up with an unideal drum sound, that Auto Align plugin can really, really help. You place it on the snare drum, use the snare as God again. You use the snare as the drum that sends to Auto Align on other channels. Then you can Auto Align your bottom snare head, which, by the way, if I didn't show you that, look at that. Where's it pointing? Center of the snare. And it's directly aligned with the top mic to help keep it in phase. So just always think about your snare drum when you're miking up drums to record at home. Always think about phase. Always check your phase. If you don't understand phase, start reading about phase. Anyway, I'm out of breath from talking so much. I'm like blah, 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 and I'm not breathing. So I'm going to say goodbye. Peace. Take it easy. Hope this helps.